So let's begin. Joining us tonight from New York, we welcome Chanel Miller, the author of the incredibly powerful memoir Name, the book about what happened before, during, and after her 2015 sexual assault by a partner. Since the court case ended, sad will add, she has overcome everything to not only survive, but thrive, starting with writing Know My Name. The 2019 book was a national bestseller and won numerous awards, including the National Books Critics Circle Award that year. She has been interviewed by anyone who's anyone, including Oprah Winfrey and Trevor Noah. While her story was a featured segment on 60 Minutes. She's been quoted by Hillary Clinton and reached out to by then VP and now President Joe Biden. She struck, and recently, in that year, I should say, she struck up an appropriate superhero pose on the cover of Time magazine, complete with an accompanying story by Christine Blasey Ford. But this shows that this was only the beginning of what is shaping to be an illustrious creative lifetime. And with her permission, that's what we'll talk about tonight. So please welcome Chanel Miller.
Hi, Michael. Nice to see you.
Hello. Gung hei fa choi.
Gong hei fa choi. Xinian kuai le.
You know, when you came to Chaucer's a few months ago, you impressed me before I even knew you were Chanel Miller. You spent some couple hours in our bookstore, inspecting, examining books, maybe even smelling them, I'm not sure. But you went to virtually every aisle of our store. And when it came to time to close, I think you were the last customers in the store. And then after paying for books, you looked at a poster for Charles Yu talking with Samir Pandia, novelist and UCS professor. And you said, "That's my teacher." And I figured you were just a student that went to UCSB. And then you took a photo of it, you took down notes. And after you left, our manager, Gretchen, and I informed me that it was you. Whereupon I uttered the same thing I said after reading your memoir. Holy shit. And it turns out you're a great customer of ours, so we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Totally. Yeah, I used to go to Chaucer's Books all the time in college. For those of you who don't know, it's in Santa Barbara. So that was my store.
So tonight is a night of celebration because on your mother's side, you're Chinese. Your mother Mei Mei, who we'll talk about a little bit. It's the lunar or Chinese New Year's Eve right now. Tomorrow's the year of the ox, but you're the year of the monkey, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that fits?
Yeah, I think it fits. And it's actually funny. I remember the moment my mom told me I was year of the monkey, and I trying to explain that it was my birth year. And I didn't understand the zodiac calendar. And I thought she was telling me that I was born from monkeys. And I remember being so upset, like realizing that she wasn't actually my mom. And she was trying to tell me this new truth. It was like this very harrowing moment, like wrapping my mind around the fact that I was born from monkeys and not people. And eventually I understood.
Wow. You grew up in the Bay Areas. San Francisco, Chinatown's nearby. Did you spend a lot of time there when you were younger?
Totally. When I was younger, and also when I was older and writing the book in San Francisco, my Gongong's retirement home would do like field trips to Chinatown. And then he would like escape from his group and then come hang out with me and always tell me where to meet him. And so we would spend the afternoon together. He would get his hair cut, buy groceries, and he'd always give me like a lot of mian bao and sesame balls and like stock me up.
Oh, yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. Those breaks from writing, being able to spend time with him. And actually the last time I saw him was Lunar New Year of last year. We all went to his apartment and he cooked for all of us. And I had no idea that was going to be the last time for a while. So,
Still
yeah.
keep in touch with him right now?
Yeah, I still keep in touch. And I actually, in the lockdown, I was FaceTiming him and I heard a voice in his apartment and I was like, who's there? And he was listening to these YouTube videos of people speaking English and just saying, like, tonight's on me, or like, I'll take the window seat. And he was
Mhm.
he was actively learning at home. And I was like, well, if he's learning to communicate more, I should improve my Chinese. So I started taking Zoom Chinese lessons with a teacher in Wisconsin, and she's been helping me every week. So
Mhm.
she helped me like draft letters, and so now he thinks I'm like a genius, but I'm a secret helper.
Don't tell him that. Let's keep it your secret, though.
So cool here.
So, growing up, your mom was a pretty big influence on you, Mei Mei,
Mhm.
and she is a maker as well, and she's a writer, isn't she?
Yes, she's written multiple books in Chinese, and I have them all on my shelf.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what did she write?
She's written everything: autobiography, fiction. Um, yeah, she's not afraid at all to be personal. She's not afraid to ask questions. Oh, that's so cute. I'm just enjoying looking at us together. And that there we're eating Gong Gong's food.
Oh, really? What
Yeah.
is it?
He usually cooks a lot of that looks like marinated chicken. He'll
Mhm.
marinate it for like 5 hours and it's insane.
Mhm. So, this was just a screen grab from Say Blues film. So, if anybody is interested in seeing Chanel's mom, Mei Mei, and her interact, it's a really sweet film. It's on YouTube. Name is Say Lou, Liu, and please check it out. Um, as a child, you had an artistic mother, but obviously you had your own curiosities, and were you always writing things down? Because every time I see you being photographed, you're writing something down or you're sketching something. So,
Yeah, I'm always writing things down, even when I go to talks with other authors and all the lights are off. I'm always writing in the dark, even though it comes out really poorly. It's how I pay attention and how I think about anything.
mm,
And then growing up, my mom, anytime she thinks about something, she'll jot it down on a receipt or a napkin, or the backs of envelopes. Like, we knew as kids never to throw her stuff away because you don't know what's written on what.
yeah.
Um, and also seeing her work late at night, eating sunflower seeds. She was always up the latest in our family. And I definitely have that same nocturnal self. And
Mhm.
but yeah, she takes notes on movies. Like, she's always scribbling things down. Um, and I always bring a notepad with me. And if I don't have anything, I feel really uncomfortable, because I don't like having to hold things in my head too long. It's like then it's
Yeah.
too constipated. I need to like
Yeah.
go home and like get it down. Yeah.
So, it was just a little unspoken you wanted to keep up with mom by writing things down, or was
Yeah.
this something in that you were feeling?
I think you do just like naturally mirror a lot of what your parents do. So seeing her writing all of the time, like consuming literature, like in the book I talk about, there was a framed portrait of Pablo Neruda, and I always thought he was a family member because I didn't understand my mom's reverence for
Uh
authors,
huh.
um, like an old
Oh,
grandpa.
Pablo.
Hmm? Yeah, that's Uncle Pablo. um, yeah, and then it's like wonderful. Like, while I was writing my book, I kept all of her books on my shelf, and she has this
Mm.
in her book flap. There's this beautiful picture of her with a big bun on her head, and I was so excited to get to have my own little birth, my own little creation to sit next to hers on the shelf. That meant a lot to me.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
And what books when you were a child and what art really did you get into your own? I mean,
That I loved.
either- yeah, that you loved.
I loved the book Unfortunately by Remy Charlotte, who was an illustrator
Mhm.
and author. And he had this book. This book, it would say, unfortunately, the kid was falling from the sky. Fortunately, there was a haystack on the ground. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
there's a pitchfork in the haystack. Fortunately, he missed it and fell in the water. Unfortunately, there are sharks in the water. So you just keep turning, and each page it's like up and down, up and down. And I love this because it's so true to life. It's like, unfortunately, I was assaulted. Fortunately, I was saved by two Swedes. Unfortunately, I entered. It's like
Yeah.
you're never stuck in one state, and you're
Mhm.
you're always fluctuating. And I think so much of life is not like striving to be happy. It's like striving to adjust better to the constant fluctuations. Like, I think the most content people are the ones who have equipped themselves to constantly adjust. Um,
Mm.
and giving themselves the tools to do that. So yeah, I just loved that lesson delivered in a very straightforward way.
Did you always have that drive to want to create something, even at a young age?
Yeah, and you know what? My second grade teacher, Mrs. Thompson, who I've emailed since my book came out, um, she would have us create books. She took our picture for our little author's photo. We would illustrate our covers, do a dedication page, a copyright page, a bio at the back. It'd be like, Chanel Miller is the author of The Black Hole and The Pink Shoe and the whatever. Like, I had 8 different books by the time I was in second grade, and I just loved it. And she would laminate everything. She would bind it with like a coil. It wasn't just like
Wow.
stapled. um, but I loved that so much. And honestly, in my 12 years of schooling, I just waited for 12 years to be able to be released as an adult so that I could only do writing and drawing and never have to focus on anything else again, which I've like pulled off pretty successfully. So it's good.
Do you have those nearby? Do you
My
have any of those binded books nearby that you can
No, but I
show?
still have them, and I have this huge manila envelope that says Miss Thompson's writing folder.
Mhm.
And my mom would sign me up. She signed me up for Future Authors Camp, FAC, in 6th
Mhm.
grade. You would show up, you each get a laptop, and write stories every day. In 7th grade, she signed me up for a writing class at Berkeley. And when I was 12 years old, I would take the train from I go to Palo Alto to Millbrae, Millbrae to Berkeley, walk across campus to my writing group. And like, I loved it. I love that she was enabling me to do what I so clearly wanted to do. Uh,
Mhm.
that was really important because in those spaces, writing is taken more seriously. Um,
Mhm.
and I loved that.
You were a professional writer almost at that young age, it seemed.
So great.
It's funny. It's really interesting that you did that or you knew that young because most of us, I didn't come to writing till I was a journalist in my 30s.
Oh,
I
wow. Yeah.
thought, oh, there are students who are watching right now, I'm sure thinking this thing is about, I was born to write. And I think that's a really cool thing that people are able to find themselves like that. So hats off to everyone.
Yeah.
Um, what when younger, before we'll get to UCSB in a little bit, but what type of writing were you really into? Like, let's say in high school, a little bit, or really drawing by then? Were you into art by then?
Oh, yeah, I was always drawing in class. Um,
Mhm.
always. And I would illustrate my own books. And when I was young, I remember thinking the only way to make something sad is to make somebody die. So, like in all of my books, someone would die. And then I was like, this is like real, like this is serious adult work and it's a tragedy. Um, and then in high school, I just did a talk with my high school actually, and I remembered I had this wonderful creative writing teacher, Mrs. Wilson, who um, I wrote. I remember I loved visual metaphors, and I use a lot of visual metaphors in my book.
Mhm.
But I used
Yeah.
to use them like back to back. Like every object in my story was a metaphor for something else. And she was like, these are wonderful, but she's like, sometimes it's okay for the fire hydrant to just be red. And
Mhm.
sometimes you need just like concrete statements to ground the rest of your writing. So you're not just like floating
Mhm.
away into abstract stuff. So that was super valuable advice that I got in high school that I still um, use now.
Mhm.
And I
Who was
also
it?
did, huh?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I had a fictional story where every time a guy blinks, he it takes a photo, and so when he dies, he's like has these piles of photos that he can look through.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. But I think in your book you used a few metaphors, but later on just went straight to it. Like I think the oatmeal came up a few regarding the sweater you were wearing, and I can't remember what you wrote about it. But then from then on it was just explain oatmeal sweater, but it conjured up images in my mind as I was reading that. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think you've managed to master that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's helpful to have concrete things to ground your piece.
Mhm. So you went to UCSB and your it sounds like your repertoire for books really expanded. I mean, I remember you were quoting Anne Lamotte, Bird by Bird, and a few others. Shangri Li was also somebody you read a lot. By the way, I'm dying to read his new book, My Year Abroad. It's
I
supposed to be really
know.
good. So, how can expand horizons as far as the literature of your development?
Wait, what was the first part of the question?
How did your college experience
Oh,
as a literature you have a degree, correct, from UCSD, and how did your education there expand your horizons
oh my
in the
gosh.
literal sense?
First of all, I had a professor, Ellen O'Connell, who reads more than
Mhm.
any human I know. Um, she would just assign us so many books that I would never pick up on my own. And I think it's really important, like, to read outside of what genre you think you like. Like, I think we all kind of self-select. But again, when I go into bookstores, I hit up every section because there's so much to offer in the different sections. And again, when I was writing, I was reading all these books about sexual assault and criminal justice, and my editor was like, "You don't only have to read those books, like, because you're learning how to write, right? And that can come from any type of genre, how to structure your story, all that." So, yeah, I was in the College of Creative Studies. I just had amazing professors and also the environment. Like we had the lagoon and eucalyptus trees and like the smell of salt and fog in the morning right by the ocean. The fact that we could read out on the lawn before class, then go gather. We'd sit around this big conference table. I had the privilege of being in these smaller classes. Um, and since we were in a smaller program, all the students were given keys to our little building where we had our literature classes. So on Thursday night,
Yeah.
we would go to that building and read our work and drink. And you could like stand on a ladder and recite something or play an instrument or perform a spoken word piece. But it was a really healthy community of, again, learning to take your work seriously, which
Mhm.
growing up in the Bay Area was definitely harder to do. And writing was seen more of like a frivolous thing. But I really like, at the time, I was doing an emphasis in creative writing. Like, again, I loved short stories. Um, but having gone through this, writing is seriously a form of self defense. And I think
Mhm.
not just the creative part, it's also, um, yeah, just like exposing yourself to all different types of emotions other people have felt. Like, it's developing empathy. It's not being afraid of like the darker things.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm so drawn to it in the first place. Like, anytime I step into a bookstore, I feel sane because I know that in the collection of voices, there's one that's going to identify with exactly what I'm feeling. Um, yeah. And so I don't know,
Mhm.
go off on a tangent. I could talk about my love of English forever. But it's just really healthy to be able to express what you love and not expend so much energy explaining why you chose to be an English major, you know, because I feel like when people are always like, what are you going to do? I'm like, why don't you ask me what my favorite books are? You know, I always felt like the conversation was not in the right place.
What's me, I think one of my favorite lines that you wrote in your book is "Writing is the world."
Is what?
I think it's the way I perceive the world. Like, did you not write that?
No, wait, no, it just keeps breaking up. I hear the world.
Writing is a way I process the world.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
It's so funny. I just kept hearing the world, and I was like, what did I say
Huh.
about the world?
Can you and you did a little bit, but when you see something like or experience something like you did, this horrific thing that Brock Turner did to you,
Hmm.
was your writing a way to process what happened to you? And if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's a way to not only process, but also preserve, right? So
Mhm.
I was suddenly thrown into an environment where every day there's 18 different witnesses in my trial, and they're all speaking to the same event, but they all have a different perspective and different angle. So it
Mhm.
was really important to be able to write down and preserve my own experience, right? Because if I didn't, then I would just start believing other people's, and that would contaminate my knowing. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's why it was important also to write the book. Like, the way the reporters wrote about the case to me was just there's such a lack of depth, right? If they saw me testifying, they'd always say that I cried, and that would be it. And to me, from my perspective, there's so much more happening. Like, the temperature and the like tension of the air in the room, like it was like this
Mhm.
physical, it was so pressing, right? And you
Mhm.
felt it as soon as you walked in. All of the little glances that other people might not see, the body language, like all of this is so important for me to document, because if I don't, then my assault becomes anybody's narrative. And that was terrifying to me. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's like preserving evidence, but it's also preserving and valuing your own perspective, which,
Mhm.
the opposing side wants you to minimize or forget or downplay.
Mhm.
So I write a lot to hold on to things.
Mhm.
when it feels like they're being taken from me. It's like, no, it's right
Yeah.
here. I have it.
Well, I'm sure it was extremely important because of the fact that you couldn't even keep your name
Yeah.
during this. I mean, you were Emily Doe, and in the courtroom, you don't know. And my question is, how were you able to be being yourself while it's, of course, being taken away from you? I mean, the media writes clean cut Brock Turner and write, Chanel Miller sounding like a Caucasian person sometimes. You didn't know who she was. Just and it seemed like everybody was trying to suck that out of you, yet you were able to maintain that. And how were you able to maintain that
I,
identity? And
yeah. I think it was really hard sometimes. And looking back, that's probably the most devastating part is how disoriented I would be after being in court and how I would forget just a lot of what I have to offer and a lot of the
Mhm.
joy that I like naturally possess, because I was so hard on myself at that time and really questioning like just like if I was good, if I, what I deserved. It was really painful. Definitely having a close circle helped because the people around me know me and know that I was not going to get lost in that anonymous self. Like they're like, Chanel
Mhm.
is in there somewhere, even if she's like mute right now or subdued or depressed, like she's in there somewhere. So their presence and the persistence of their presence made sure that I like didn't completely lose myself. Um, and then again, like it's interesting that when I was waiting for trial, I was like, what do I do? And the first thing I thought of was taking that summer course at the Rhode Island School of Design and doing printmaking,
Yeah. Mhm.
because it's almost like I was suddenly fragmented, like all my selves had been broken up and the court one was like dominating. And I didn't like that one. And so I was like, I need to go feed my other little selves before they like
Mhm.
die. And so I took myself to Rhode Island to feed my art self. And then I just had to like make sure that I was nourishing my whole self while all of this was going
Mhm.
on, um, in order to, yeah, make sure like I didn't disappear into what was happening.
Mhm. Well, it kept your sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you came out well on the other side.
Yeah.
Um, we talked earlier about, I mentioned about my uncle. My family was in an internment camp. My father in. My grandfather didn't separate from the, yeah, I separated here. My grandmother died in camp. My uncle, my dancers directly from the camp. He learned to dance in the camp and he ended up being in the King, and I knew all these people and danced for 40 years. Had a wonderful career, but it came such a terrible thing.
Yeah.
My question to you is, you are doing that. How are you able to do that? Be able to reconcile it. Really, this terrible, terrible thing happened, but now because done and what you said and who you are, you have this platform
Yeah.
to be able to express yourself. Express it well, I might add. But if you could talk a little bit about experience of taking something so terrible, taking into something and making it a,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for your uncle, like thinking about the internment camps, it's so bleak, bare boned, nothing suggesting human life or taste or growth or humor or beauty, right? It's just stripped down to the basic elements. And so I imagine he had to create it for himself, right? In order to like affirm his own humanity. And to survive that time, I believe.
Yeah.
And for me,
That, yeah.
yeah, like court, I have great respect for all lawyers because I don't know how they do this because the courthouse was so opposite of like any environment I'd ever want to create. And even like if I turned my camera around, there's like little cacti and a whole shelf of children's books and my lights. And there's like, I need
Mhm.
life and these personal traits. I need fire, like I always have a fire going, or I need movement. And in court, it always just felt so stale and there's no art, there's no nourishment. And like, even there was a bag of markers for kids in the waiting room, but they were dry. And like, I
Yeah.
talked about that, their uncapped heads, like that actually killed me. I was like, oh, your markers don't even work. And so I I was like, my spirit is actively dying in this environment. And I remember asking my advocate actually, um, can I, if I made a little illustration or something, is it something you would think about either putting up, helping me put up in this room, the waiting room, or inserting into that folder of brochures that they gave me? And this is before my statement blew up or anything, but already I was
Mhm.
thinking like, why can't there be illustrations here? Why can't there be something cueing people in that they're still connected to the world? There's people
Mhm.
outside of these walls who care about you. Like, it was just so bleak that it really killed me. And I like felt this instinct um to just be the warm thing in this cold place. Uh,
Mhm.
and that still is the way today. I like, thankfully I haven't had to go back there ever. Um, but I think about like little slivers of warmth that would slip in, just like the court reporter when she would wink at me. Like that's
Okay.
the warmth. I think about the morning at the hospital when the intern made me oatmeal. That's a piece of warmth.
Mhm.
But I just so believe in like creating spaces of warmth and giving people pieces of warmth because I know that even if they're not in a courtroom, they're in their own bleak realm, like post
Mhm.
assault or isolated realm. And I just like want to permeate that world with like little reminders like you're still connected to everyone. Life is supposed to be beautiful, or it's supposed to give you good things. And so if what you're seeing is like so awful, it's not the full picture.
Mhm. It didn't break you then.
No.
So, how about picking some passages, maybe if you can read for people to the book?
Yeah.
I'll let you choose.
All right. So um this passage, so there's something really interesting. I invited, no, my friends threw me a book party when the book was out and secretly invited a few of my UCSB professors, which was amazing. And I remember one of them said that she saw the book as like a love story to my sister, with my sister. And I thought that was a really amazing take on it and rung very true to me. And so I'm going to read a passage where my sister and I had just come home during trial. She had testified that day. She had been cross-examined by the defense attorney and was really struggling. And I was watching her struggle, just like sitting on the couch thinking about if she had said anything wrong, whatever. Um, and then as a side note too, the defense attorney had asked me what my dad had cooked for dinner the night of the assault. And I had said, I don't even, my dad had made quinoa, but I had said stir fry. And then I had obsessed over if that would throw something off. So,
Yeah.
so I'm with my sister in our living room.
Okay.
Um, as I sat there, witnessing her crumbling before me, her agony in trying to carry this all, I finally understood. He knew there was a part in us that was self-conscious, the lingering voices that told us we were in the wrong. Wasn't it you who left, who said she was fine? He found it, hooked into it, injected it, grew it until the guilt was all consuming. Until we became so inundated by self blame, so blinded by the pain, we lost the ability to see. It was happening to her and it was happening to me. The two of us fed distorted realities, our words twisted until we became uncertain, discredited, writing ourselves off as flawed and broken. We willingly rammed our heads against the walls, confused, apologizing, unsure of what right we had to speak. I had unlocked the secret of the game. This was not a quest for justice, but a test of endurance. His mistake was that he was going after someone I would go to the ends of the earth for. See, if it had just been me in there, being attacked, I might have backed down, retreating to my places of self doubt. But her? I had been asked earlier in the day what I meant when I'd said I was more of a mother to her than a sister. I wanted to say, I don't know. You tell me. What happens when a person gets in between a mother bear and her cub? Have you read about the maulings, faces ripped clean? I took my meticulously typed guidelines and encouragements, threw them in a drawer, gave myself a new mantra. Fuck the fried rice. Fuck what you sipped, how you sipped, when you sipped, with whom. Fuck if I danced on the table. Fuck if I danced on the chair. You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Your whole answer was sitting with his shoulders low, head down, his neatly cut hair. You want to know why my whole goddamn family was hurting, why I lost my job, why I had 4 digits in my bank account, why my sister was missing school? It was because on a cool January evening, I went out while that guy there had decided that yes or no, moving or motionless, he wanted to fuck someone, intended to fuck someone, and it happened to be me. This did not make me deficient. This did not make me inadequate, but it did make me angry. My sister allowed me to see what I needed to see. Pain, when examined closely, became clarity. I knew now what the attorney had come here to do, and I would not let it happen. He believed he could break us, but from this day forward, I would begin to build. Thank you.
Uh,
I also want to say, like, in the media, I think you see a lot of rape revenge narratives. And it's really important to see like the motivation behind the fighting. And it's usually not to attack the opposing party, it's to fight for someone you love. Like that's the fuel. So I think that's important to note too.
mhm. Wow. Thank you. Shall we continue? Just enjoying this.
Yeah. 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 Do we want to move into questions or how are we on timing?
We're good at time. We can go a little bit over too. And there's just a few things I would like to ask them. We'll hand it over to the audience. But
Sure.
would you like to read one more? Would that be
Sure. I'll read a quick one.
okay?
So, all right, this is toward the end. End on a note that's a little bit more hopeful. Many of us struggle to crawl out from under what we've been given, to build ourselves beyond the small definitions we've been assigned. I feared at times that I'd lost my imagination because I felt boxed in by my role as victim. But when I was trapped, I learned I could still move internally. When I felt depressed, I wrote and imagined my future down to the coffee bean, the children's books I will illustrate, the chickens I will have in my yard, the soft cotton linens, the sauce dipped wooden spoons on the counter. The need for it to come true according to plan was not important. The act of imagining was. I wrote this book because the world can be harsh and terrible and often unforgiving. I wrote because there were times I did not feel like living. I wrote because the court system is slow as a snail and victims are forced to spend so much time fighting rather than spending their days creating, drawing, cooking. I wrote to expose the brutality of entitlement, gender violence, and class privilege in our society. But I would be failing you if you walked away from this book untouched by humanity, without seeing what I saw. Those thousands of handwritten letters, the green lipped fish at the bottom of the ocean, the winking court reporter, all the small miracles that sustained me. We may spend half our time wandering around, wondering what we're even doing here, why it's worth the effort. But living is an incredible thing. Just to have been here, to have felt, if only briefly, the volume and depth of others' empathy. I wrote most of all to tell you I have seen how good the world could be. Thank you.
Wow. Bravo.
Thank you.
Just beautiful. Wow. Oh.
Sweet.
So, how have you been
How have I been?
since all this whole, it's been quite a think. I mean, with everything that happened in 2019 with the release of the book. And now, here, I'll share it with everybody. This past, what was it? This past summer, Time
Mm-hmm.
Magazine asked you to do something with it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And this was happening right when COVID went on, and the backlash against all people Asian,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a response. And if
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Man, it's so difficult because even just this past week, there was an alarming number of violent anti Asian crimes. And I've been in so many different stages of processing. Like at first in March, I felt like I was trying to get out ahead of it, alert people to what's happening, but we're here almost a year later. And if anything, it's gotten worse and the amount of hate crimes have increased. So I'm actually really hurting and I'm really tired. Um, and I'm going to try and do more illustrations around this issue because it's how I cope and how I respond. But I think it's also important just to take note of I just need to also take care of myself. I think like all year I've been just trying to communicate that this is happening. I think a lot of Asian Americans have been speaking about it, and only recently have we been amplified into mainstream media outlets. Um, but it's hard to know how how much we have to speak in order to be heard. Um, but it's an ongoing
Mhm,
problem. I'm still thinking about it and still just working through it. Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Well, it's been a long time coming for Asian Americans, especially like my generation. We didn't speak out.
Yeah.
So we're kind of dumping it onto your generation and beyond to do the work for us. And
Yeah.
to everyone out there, I apologize. We didn't speak loud enough, but
No, 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 not at all. I mean, I feel like the generation before mine, like my mom was, the focus was like getting here and building the houses that we grew up in. And I feel like we had the privilege of just growing up in a more stable environment with more options, at least for me. Um, And again, I do think it's wonderful to see like the openness that's happening with the younger generation and like facing that trauma, right? And starting to unpack it. But you also, yeah, putting the older generation within the context of society too is really important. It's like it was so much harder to speak and so risky. And I think um, we don't see it as a burden. We see it as just like our time to protect our elders, our time to have these conversations with our parents, and to like collectively unpack even the lifetime of microaggressions. You know, there's like so much coming up right now. It's just not within this last year, but like our whole lives, you know. So it's
But
it's a
we do
yeah.
need people like you to lead us, and
Thank you.
I will go before.
Yeah.
And if, at the risk of embarrassing Chanel, that she just did some volunteer work at a food distribution that's dealing with uh, Asian people. You are doing some artwork, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I would encourage everyone to look out for your like grassroots community organizations. There's an organization in New York called Heart of Dinner, and they prepare food for elderly Asian communities, and they distribute it in these brown paper bags. So I went and picked up 100 bags, and we'll be adding illustrations to them to like spice up the delivery. And it's a little thing, but doodling is what I know how to do, doodling and speaking. So I hope everyone is responding to what's happening now in some way. It would mean a lot to me.
So before I turn it over to the audience,
Yeah.
speaking of doodling, I believe your next project, obviously, is not going to be a memoir, but it has to do with art and children, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be like
Can
an
you talk
illustrated
about it?
story. I can talk around it. It's like an illustrated story for
Okay.
younger readers. Um, But again, like I honestly think there's gonna be so many all my themes when I'm old and have a body of work, I think the theme through a lot of my work will just be empathy and like learning to listen to yourself and like helping dissolve a lot of the shame around anything you go through. So I think that'll all be there. It'll just be told in different ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Got some time here, Chanel. You can answer some questions.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, can you read them first, or
Yeah.
all right? You want it from the top?
Okay, let's start at the top. Oh, this is 1 years ago. Oh, okay, okay.
No.
Okay, that's so
Yeah.
nice. Hello. Okay, so how I decided to go public and write the book, and where did I find the extra strength to share with the world? Oh, okay. So first, I want to note that it took me like 4 years to come to peace with the idea of going public. Um, and that decision had to happen on my own time. And while I was writing, when I signed the contract for the book, I didn't promise to come out at the end. That's really important because it has to be on according to your own timeline. um, when I finished the book, I think my main priority at that point, I'd already heard like every insult you could hear, every like takedown of my case. So I was like, okay, well, I've kind of survived that part already. Like any critique, whatever. But physical safety is a very real thing. Um, but like 4 years of being isolated really took a toll on me. You know, going to events, not being able to discuss my love of writing, not being able to connect to other authors, like I felt like I was depriving myself of so much. And I think what's important to realize when you do come forward is, and what other people should see is that you're not just like, hey, by the way, everyone, I was assaulted. It's like, hey, this is me. And like, this is how much I've grown. And this is who I am as a result of what happened. It's not even just telling people you're assaulted, it's like celebrating the parts of you that have grown and survived. And that's also really important to acknowledge and wonderful to see. So I hope if and whenever you do come forward, yes, it's very nerve-wracking, and yes, I still got some terrible messages, but like I'm just so much more at ease with myself and rooted in myself. And I just feel like I don't want to be this sunny person if the person doesn't also know about my difficult parts, because that's like cheating in some way. Like they should be able to hold both parts of me, to fully interact with me. And the same should be true for you too. Everyone who gets to benefit from your like niceness and happiness should also be able to make space for what you've been through. So, yeah.
That's nice. So now I want to know how you're visioning your life ahead of you and how you think and how you think life suits you forward.
How do you think the life pursuits? So, like, I've talked about this before, but just like the beauty of choice, because I was assaulted almost like 6 months after graduation. And so it was sort of like a universe assignment. The universe was like, okay, now you got to attend to this and figure this out and go through all the levels and evolve. And then I completed the journey, whatever, came out with a book. And so the beauty right now is being able to choose to write a book that may even be a little bit silly, but I don't care because it's my choice. And there's so much power in that. And I think it'll be powerful for other people to see that survivors can go on and do whatever the heck they want. Like, I think that's the point. Um, you aren't confined by your story. And yes, it has dominated the last like 6 years of my life. But now I have a chance to tell other stories. So I do feel really hopeful. And it's not like I've reached some like sunny field where I'm free from everything. I still feel so much when I see stories of other survivors. I still feel uneasy on the anniversary of the assault. Like there's a lot that I live with, but um, have a better idea of how to deal with it, and how to balance it with other things in my life. So yeah, I feel much healthier, not because I'm happier, but because I'm more familiar with all that I've been through.
So what is when they're not and who want the survivors who want to write about their stories, and do you have any practical advice on how to write about something so extremely difficult?
Um, I will say that you'll probably cry a lot while writing. And okay, my first ask is that on days that you don't get any writing done because you're crying, that's still productive because you're
Yeah.
processing. And like that's gonna take time. So please count that as productivity, because it's just as important to the process. And then my other advice, my editor, I was having a really hard time writing in the beginning because I was so used to being witnessed all the time. Like the fact that every word I had ever said in court was typed into something. I was just like too aware of other people seeing me, and like, how do you speak openly if you're always thinking through other lenses, other perspectives? So my editor would say, like, imagine you and I are just sitting down on a bench talking to each other. And so anytime I got caught up in like, who's gonna read this? Am I gonna get sued? I would just come back to, at the end of the day, it's just a conversation between me and the reader, as if we're on a bench together, on a nice afternoon, and I'm choosing to open myself to you. So just create like a safer, envision that you're speaking to someone you care about in like a safe environment, because then you can really write openly.
Thank you. So first, I wanted to know first if Was there ever a point in your life you weren't proud to be Asian American? So what caused the shift from that to how you feel about being Asian American today? Wow, that's a
Yeah.
great question.
It's a great question. And I think a lot of Asian Americans have felt that. Like growing up, yeah, when my mom would take me to China, I wasn't like, well, I'm so honored to learn about my heritage and history. I was like, it's so hot. Like, I hate Chinese opera. It's like too high pitched. It sounds like mosquitoes. I was always complaining. I was like, this is too oily. I don't like, I was such a nuisance. And there was so much rejection happening. And so yeah, for most of my adolescent life, I was trying to assimilate, and it doesn't help that all of the media that we're being fed, like, I don't see people who look like me. I don't affiliate beauty with me, even though now I fully understand that I'm beautiful. Growing up, it's like, okay, well, why am I not in the magazines then, right? Like, there has to be a reason I'm being excluded, or that people aren't going out of their way to include people who look like me. And so I'm like, man, I wish I hadn't been so self-loathing, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I wish I lived in a society that just celebrated diversity more naturally. And like, now it's starting to happen. You see more, like Asian American artists and filmmakers, and it's incredible to witness, and has helped a lot with just realizing what a beautiful thing it is for me to have grown up with two different cultures, and just seeing it as like this untapped wellspring of stories. And it's something that I'm still exploring now and will continue to explore in my work. But I am very proud, and it was part of why I decided to come forward, because I want people to see that I'm Asian American, and I wanted other Asian Americans to see that the world was caring for me, which means that they also care for you. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm. And how can you buy a book in Mandarin or Chinese characters? Do you know?
Where's that one? How
Oh,
can
that was the first part of the question was if how can she buy a
Oh,
book?
you know what? This is for Yvonne. Yvonne, I will mail you one, because I don't think you can find it here.
What a gift. How are
Huh?
you holding out here? How are you holding out here? Are you up a couple more, maybe? Just a
Yeah,
couple
yeah,
more?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Yvonne,
All right.
mail Michael, email Michael with your address.
Events at events at chaucersbooks.com.
Okay.
Okay, Yvonne. All right. There's one celebration New Year, being away from your family. Rachel wanted to.
How am I celebrating?
Yeah. Are you celebrating? Or are you able to celebrate Lunar New Year?
I'm definitely gonna go to Chinatown and eat. Oh my gosh, I'm like sad to my bones that I'm not with family, but it's okay, because I'm gonna bike over to Chinatown and it's gonna be okay.
Wow.
But yeah, usually we would all get together. There'd be like dancing, crazy meals. Yeah,
That's
I will video FaceTime my gong gong on WeChat, call my mom,
okay.
and then go eat.
And there's no shortage of Chinese restaurants in New York, obviously,
No.
which several people have asked, how
Uh-huh.
New York?
How did I what?
How are you adjusting to New York? People
Oh,
have asked.
well, it's since everything's so slow and quiet. Like when we moved here during the pandemic, there would be like 3 cars going down our street in a day. And I was like, oh, New York, like I can cross the street. I can I can hang with the pace of this city because everything's moving so slowly and quietly. And it's interesting. You don't have to like, yeah, compete for space. You have plenty of room on the sidewalk. I I think I'm going to have like sensory implosion when everything's back to normal because I'm just not ready. Yeah.
Well, you moved at the right time. I think we talked about
I
this earlier.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a question, but a comment from Ro. Thank you so much for all for who you are. You give me strength when I can't find any.
Oh,
That's from Ro.
that's so amazing. Thank you. Connor! Sorry. Connor,
Go ahead.
text me. Oh my gosh, I see an old classmate. This is so wonderful. Connor.
Connor.
Oh, that's
So he
so
wants to know what you're feeling today when you're not feeling creative.
um what do I
That's
do?
Connor.
Oh, when I'm not feeling creative? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm oh, I don't even have an answer because I've just not been producing. But I honestly think like creativity also counts when you're consuming. So I'm very deliberate about what I choose to consume. And like by everyone coming here today, I hope you've gotten like nuggets of wisdom for writing. So I understand when I'm in absorb mode and then when I need to switch to output mode. Um, so just even when you aren't creating, like you just have to have faith that that little creative thing hasn't collapsed. It's just
Mhm.
soaking in, and then at some point, like things will click, and you're like, now I know what to do. That's always how it's been for me.
Mhm. Chanel Miller, thank you very much. Yes, this is an amazing evening. I'm glad you came to our store in December, and we'll be back very soon. And everyone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Michael and Chaucers. I really enjoyed this evening with all of you. And hope you keep safe and have a wonderful Lunar New Year.
Good night.
Okay, good night.